Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. And I am here with a kind-hearted man named Nick, who agreed to let me record this so that y'all can benefit from his experience and wisdom and strength and hope, as well as his trials and tribulations and stumbles and falls. Isn't that right, Nick?
That certainly is, yeah.
Why don't you give me a little background about whatever you happen to be struggling with and tell me what successes you've had, what failures you've had, and where I could help you.
Okay. I suppose over the last 20 years or so, I'm 53, but maybe 20, 25 years, I have been up and down in terms of my weight. And I've recorded my weight all that time. And I was looking at a graph and it just goes up and down and up and down. I never get really, really overweight, but it had got to the situation where 4 months ago, I was the heaviest I'd ever been, which was about 200 pounds. So I suppose I kind of feel that I've never really managed to knock the weight thing on the head. I've generally been able to diet and then lose weight. And then over the course of 6 months or so, it all comes back on and then have a bit of a pause, put a bit more on, and then it comes back off again. And last maybe 3 years, for some reason, the diets I've done just haven't stuck. It's been a real struggle. I would say until I read your book, which was about 4 months ago now, 3.5 months ago now, I have had one of the most successful few months of working on my diet and my weight and those sorts of things. Since then, it's been a huge, huge help.
Tell me what you did that's helped you.
It was interesting because we were on holiday in France. I live in the UK and my daughter is 21 and she's a bit like me food-wise. She could eat lots and lots of stuff all the time, almost never stop, except that she doesn't. And we were walking on the beach and I was thinking, so what is it? What do you think the key is? Why is it that she's sort of slimmed down and she's very slim now? And she had very, very strict rules. And I kind of knew this because I live with her, but it was really talking to her. And she said, just really, really strict rules about what I eat. From the age of about 9, that young an age, she would restrict herself to one sweet thing a day, and she keeps that going right until today. I knew that when I'd stuck to clear rules, mostly when I was on diets, that had really worked for me as long as I was really strict with myself. The next day, I started reading, basically saying almost the same things from that point of view as she was saying, which is this absolute, very, very clear, specific rules that you don't break and you stick to them. I suppose those two things aligned perfectly with this realization of why she, that was quite like me, was not binging and going on diets. She was just stuck to this very, very strict way of being. Very, very clear rules. And then, of course, adding on to that, the idea of the pig and being extremely firm with my own inner voice and my own inner feelings and recognizing them when they came up and just being really, really strict with that, and I think it's those two things in combination. So that was on holiday. We got back and I started, I think this would be, say, the 1st of July, so we're 3.5 months on from there now. So I started following a set of very simple, clear rules and being really firm with myself. And Yes, it was those two things, I think, in combination that made a huge difference to me.
What are the simple, clear rules that you're following?
3 meals a day, only fruit being allowed in between the meals. Fruit is not for whatever reason, that is not something which I will binge on. It's never been a problem for me. 1 or 2 pieces of fruit, that's it. And, that's still the case now. So fruit between meals is healthy, it's relatively low calorie, and is quite useful occasionally if I'm feeling a bit hungry. Because I've been dieting, then I've been 1,700 calories a day. So my idea was not to go too intense in terms of number of calories, but make sure it was a deficit, because I do need to actually lose, or I did need to lose weight. Although I've now hit my weight target, actually, the first time I got to this weight once in the last 15 years, I think it is. So before, and really, really simple. And I think that simplicity is really helpful, actually.
At what rate did you lose the weight? How many pounds per week did you lose the weight?
I suppose it was about 2 pounds a week to start with. And more recently, more like 1 pound a week. I kind of got to that stage actually the last 3 weeks where I just sort of haven't lost anything. The irony was I hit my weight loss goal and then it just seemed to stay there. I've still kept to the rules, but I think it's just that you get to that point whereby I probably will carry on losing weight as I carry on that calorie restriction. But my goal is only a couple more weeks of doing that, actually. As long as I can stay where I am now, I think that's key. Yeah, so faster initially, and then it slowed down, as you might expect.
Do you have any other rules?
I suppose I do have one other rule, which is no sweet things after meals, which was something I used to do. So I might have some chocolate after a meal. So as part of the meal, I can only have the main course.
No desserts?
Yeah, no desserts, basically. Yeah, no ice cream or chocolate or anything along those lines. So it's a meal, but the meal has to just be the meal. To be fair, at the moment, when I'm restricting calories, then I can't really afford to have desserts anyway. But that is a rule. What I intend to do going forward is I intend to keep the rule going without the calories restriction, but keep the no desserts side. So actually, I do allow myself fruit after a meal if I want it. So fruit is kind of allowed at any time, but no naughty snacks, basically.
You're not going to be a naughty boy, huh? And what's your plan for maintenance? Sounds like you're just about to where you want to maintain. What's your plan for maintenance?
Well, so it's keep the same rules, actually, but rather than being 1,700 calories, just not limit it. I'm thinking that about 2,500 should be like a standard maintenance calorie count for me and my size and height and so on. So, and I do exercise as well. So, I burn a few calories that way. Yeah, I'm thinking that if I'm having no desserts, but I'm just having more normal meals without each meal having to try and restrict the calories, basically the same rules, but just not thinking about the 1,700 calories. So that's what I hope to do.
And then you just weigh yourself so that you know if you're creeping up or something and you adjust back downwards if you have to, or?
My goal is to weigh myself once a week. Yeah, to be fair, during this last few months, I've been weighing myself really rarely.
That's okay.
The reason being that weighing myself would make my pig go wild. Like, I'd do it first thing in the morning. The rest of that morning, I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about the weight, even though I'd lost weight. The last few months have been anything to stop me thinking about weight and losing weight and food. And to me, this whole idea of controlling my inner pig and just stopping any thoughts along those lines. So actually, I was finding weighing was just kind of bringing the pig out, and then I'd have to really be conscious of it for like the rest of the morning. And just by not weighing, it just didn't come up. So like I did sometimes, but it was just easier not to.
You found a frequency that works for you. That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, so how can I help? It sounds like you have this kind of dialed in. Are you still frightened that this is just a diet and you're going to bounce back? How can I help?
And my fear at this stage is I've never kept the weight off. I was reading quite a depressing book, I forget the name of it now, about 2 years ago. It was talking about the weight set point and how there's this drive to get back to that original weight that you were at, which is why so many people can't lose weight. And I sort of read that book, and it was a bit depressing in some ways, because it's kind of like your body is pushing you to get back to that point. And so at the moment, I'm there thinking, all right, is that going to really kick in? Am I going to be able to keep this going because I haven't in the past? I sort of think I probably will, but the problem is that isn't my record. And so when I kind of look at the past, there's doubt, I suppose. At the moment, I'm feeling very positive. I know that I haven't been able to do that in the past. And I worry that I'm going to start feeling more hungry and then I'm going to break my rules.
I could tell you a couple of things that'll help you here, if that's okay.
Okay.
I'm not actually going to go through a formal coaching session because you have this almost entirely nailed in. I just want to address the fear that you have. We've worked with over 2,000 people and we do studies to follow up and figure out what's the difference between people who maintain their weight loss versus people who go back. And one of the biggest differences is that people who go back, they had an attitude that they were only using these rules to lose the weight. But then once they got there, they were going to let go of the rules. It doesn't really work because it tells the pig that it's free. And it doesn't really work because it leaves you vulnerable to more emotional and physiological pushes to make food decisions rather than continuing to make them with your head. Your idea about sticking with your rules, but just adjusting the number of calories upwards makes a lot of sense. There are a couple of things about how and when you do that that could help. There's a study called the Matador study where there was a control group who basically a calorie restricted diet and they lost weight until they got to their maintenance level and then they tried to maintain. But then there was an experimental group who was told to alternate 2 weeks on a deficit and then 2 weeks at maintenance. And I think they did this for about 6 months. And it turned out that the experimental group was better at maintaining the weight than the control group that just went right down to their goal weight. And they theorized why, which I think was accurate, which was that their bodies got used to the levels in small doses and they got to practice their maintenance skills all along the way. And so one thing that you could do, I mean, you're almost there now, but you could take a maintenance break right now for a little while. Or if not a maintenance break, maybe you could slow down the weight loss a little bit. I know you're probably excited about getting to your goal, but let's say you have 5 or 10 pounds to lose. You could take a break for a couple of weeks or just maybe lose a half a pound or a quarter of a pound a week for a little while. Rather than like crashing into the ground for a landing, you're actually firing the thrusters a little bit in reverse so you have a very soft landing and you develop some skills along the way. And so if you're thinking about adjusting up to 2,500 calories, rather than do that all of a sudden, which could signal to your brain that you live in a feast and famine environment and all of a sudden it's time to feast, you could go to like 1,900 calories now and just kind of get used to that for a week and then go to 2,100 calories. And you could start the process of coming off of a diet sooner and be developing your maintenance skills quicker. And then when you were getting close, like if you're doing 2,100, you could have a week at 2,500 and like not lose the last pound, or 2 weeks and then go back down to 2,100 to take the last pound off. So the whole thing is all about not shocking your system and giving yourself time to get used to stuff so you don't really trigger some of those physiological things that you're worried about. And then the other part is that you keep rules in place so that you continue to be the pig's master and not the pig's slave. It's just that you're feeding it a little more. You're feeding yourself a little more during that period. What do you think?
That sounds really useful. I always like it when there's been a study that suggests that it's likely to be more likely to work because that appeals to me. I think belief is a huge element actually of the whole thing. And so that sounds like a really good idea. Yeah, I think I should give that a go.
Okay. Well, what questions or concerns do you have? What other fears do you have about going off your diet? Or one thing might be to stop calling it a diet. You can just call it your plan. And your plan will be different depending on what your physical goals are. You're no longer living in a world where you have a diet or not a diet. You're just always on a plan, like your daughter's been her whole life.
Yes, exactly. That's very true. It's just a set of rules that I'm going to follow going forward. And I'll give you an example. Just 2 days ago was the first time I didn't keep my rules all day. And I was feeling a little under the weather. I gave in to the pig that was saying to me, "You're not feeling very good here. I was really low in energy. You probably shouldn't be eating fewer calories at the moment." And I actually, to be fair, I thought that was pretty logical. What happened was that as soon as I wasn't following any rules for the day, it almost went wild. It wasn't absolutely terrible, but it was like the old me returning. What you've just said about still having a very, very clear set, it was almost like once the rules were gone, now you can just go for it. And so I did, and it's that having to sort of keep myself limited, like my daughter has done, that I think is the key for me, actually.
You'd be better off, Nick, setting up a conditional exception so that you were allowed to eat more when you didn't feel well, but it was specified beforehand with very clear boundaries. You'd be better off doing that than just letting go of the rules. The difference between being in control of your eating versus feeling food addicted, it has to do with whether you're making food decisions with your intellect versus your emotions and whims and physiology. If you're always on a plan, then you're never going to spontaneously adjust your plan because your body feels like it, or because your pig tells you to, or because you have some thought or whim or emotion or physical impulse. If you have uncomfortable physical impulses for a couple of days, you might adjust your plan, but you'll do it with 24 to 48 hours to think about what that adjustment might be and how it's going to affect you. And that way, if your set point starts to push too hard before you get used to it, you don't have to be scared that you're going to immediately do that because you're always on a plan. Just like when you're driving. There's never a time when you're driving that you say the rules of the road don't apply. I can go as fast as I want. I don't have to wait for other cars. Turns anywhere I want to, whenever I want to. Who cares about the lights? You never do that. We always follow the rules of the road. And it's a perfectly comfortable way of living. People enjoy their lives more and they have more freedom because the rules of the road protect them. You're much better off following the rules of the road. Just change the rules of the road if they're too strict.
In terms of this idea of a set point and like set point theory that we will kind of go back, is your experience then that people that really stick with the rule, with some rules going forward, they do keep it off in the long term?
Yeah. The problem you got to watch out for is that if your primary motivation was to lose weight, then the problem is that when you lose the weight, you don't have the motivation anymore. But if your primary motivation is to escape the diet mentality, because it's kind of torturous to go up and down, and to escape the torturous food obsession that goes along with it, and maintain your health and everything like that, then you can stay motivated to go forward. And the way to go forward is not to bend the rules, to always stick to the rules. And the people who lose weight and keep it off for years, that's what they do. They always have rules, at least with this method.
I have to say I am incredibly motivated. It's the last few years has just been painful, putting weight on and not being able to get it off. And, now I have lost the weight again. I'm so motivated to just stay here and, so desperate to stay here actually, because it's been a huge release at least the last month particularly, because as time goes on, then the pig just wanes. That's certainly what I found. And to have kind of be getting down towards my target weight, it's been like a huge release. And I'm much happier now sticking to rules, even though I'm restricting calories, than I was before. And I'm desperate not to get back to this food addicted state that I've just been in. So,
because dieting sucks. And it's good to be done with it for the rest of your life.
Wouldn't that be nice? And that's what I want. That's what really, really what I want, actually. So I've just got to keep the set of rules and then stick to that really, really firmly.
Yeah. Adjust the rules if you need to. Keep weighing in with some frequency, not every day, but some frequency, so that you know when the rules need adjustment. And then it doesn't matter what your set point does or what your sister's cousin's parakeet does to upset you one day, because you're not going to make important food decisions based upon your feelings. You're going to make them using your intellect. Do you have any other questions or concerns?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, thank you, Nick, so much.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.